Art has long attracted and inspired people from all backgrounds. The smile of the Mona Lisa, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and more recently, a play about one of America's founding fathers in the hit Broadway show, Hamilton. But making art takes money, and unless you have a generous benefactor, funds can be hard to come by, which is why one city has gotten very creative. 0.1%. That's the amount of a sales tax that keeps arts and culture alive in the city of Denver, Colorado. In 1988, the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District began collecting 1 penny from every $10. That money funds the Denver Zoo, the city's Museum of Nature and Science, and the Denver Botanic Gardens. It also supports about 250 smaller arts organizations around Denver's 7-county metro area. The recently renewed tax is popular among residents who see their pennies pay off in rich and rewarding ways. The Woodruff Arts Center here in Atlanta is a well-regarded and well-funded nonprofit arts and cultural organization. President and CEO Doug Shipman has a career journey that could make some believe that he was predestined to be in his current post. His story is today's Executive Profiles.
I grew up in Bull Shoals, Arkansas. It's a town of 1,200 in northern Arkansas, almost in Missouri. My parents are still there. Hunting, fishing, going on lakes. It's a beautiful part of the country, but it's not near anything else.
So how does a kid from rural Arkansas find Emory University?
My high school counselor walked in one day and said, I really think you ought to think about applying to this university. And she was helping me apply to lots of places nationally. And she said, there's a scholarship you should apply for. And so I went home and applied for the scholarship. Turned out to get invited to interview at Emory for the Woodruff Scholarship. Ended up getting the Woodruff Scholarship, and I had a friend from Little Rock who also wanted to come to Emory, so I decided to come to Emory.
What was the experience like for you?
It was the first time I'd ever been on an airplane, when I flew for the interview, actually, because I didn't grow up with much money. And so I got here, and I was really taken with the diversity, because where I grew up, there wasn't much diversity at all. And in fact, I really got into that scene. I used to go to services at Old Ebenezer. I started learning about Dr. King, got very interested in the civil rights legacy. And I also got interested in the cultural scene because my roommate was a theater guy.
What were you going to do with your life when you were 21, 22 years old?
Well, I knew that my heart was in nonprofit and sort of the public sector, but I also knew that I needed analytical skills. And so I actually went into banking as an analyst up in Richmond, Virginia, got recruited out of Emory. But because of where my heart was, when I made my graduate school decision, I actually decided not to go to business school, but I decided to pursue some of my passions.
And that passion was?
So it was a combination of public policy and theology. So I ended up going to Harvard. In public policy, that was a bit of my professional degree. And then theology was really a way to study religion, but at Harvard, it is across religious traditions. So I studied Dr. King, I studied Malcolm X, I studied Gandhi, studied Buddhism and environmentalism, all these places that religion and social movements come together. And so when I graduated, my wife, who I had met, wanted to go to medical school. She pulled us back to Atlanta to go to Emory, and I ended up working in the private sector again.
With all of this, you found yourself going to Boston Consulting Group. What was that move for you like, and what did you get out of that?
I really liked the work. Again, it was a way to have an analytical, almost a post-grad degree in analytics. I ended up coming to Atlanta, and then I got an opportunity to work in India for a year. So I was transferred with BCG to Mumbai. And then when I came back, I got to do a pro bono project actually with the symphony on a pricing model, which was fascinating.
I'm seeing a Woodruff string all the way through all this.
There's a little bit, unintended. And then the Mayor Shirley Franklin called the firm and asked about someone who could do a 10-week pro bono project, and that's when the next phase started.
The Center for Civil and Human Rights. What was that like for you, and was it daunting at all, stepping into a role like that?
Well, I didn't know I was stepping into the full role. It was a 10-week ask, and she asked if anybody knew anything about civil rights history or museums. I had a long history of understanding civil rights history. And so 10 weeks, we really hit it off, and the project had some legs. So she said, well, will you continue as a pro bono consultant for another year as I stand up a commission to look at this? And so I said yes. And then she said, well, will you take a year as a loaned executive and start this? So I thought I was in for one more year, and that turned into 8 more years of setting it up. For me, it was always about trying to bring these stories of legacy to 15-year-olds, people who don't know anything about them. And so it was a joy.
Talk about the transition then to the next phase to go back into more of a consultative role.
So I got invited to come back to Bright House, as it came into BCG. And it really was the combination of some of my kind of heart issues and wanting to bring those to bear, but also back to the private sector. And it was in growth mode. So it was a very exciting time, and when we tripled the business in 2 years and hired lots and lots of people and expanded it in some very significant ways. And frankly, I was very happy there and not expecting to leave at all.
And then the phone rings and you hear that Virginia Hepner has decided to retire from the Woodruff Arts Center. Did you even think this would be a possibility?
I didn't before that phone call. I didn't really consider that we would be a match. I'm a longtime patron, especially more recently to all the young people's programs. But I didn't know if it was really a match between my skill set and what the center wanted, what the board wanted. Mm-hmm. But when they started to describe all the work that's been done in the past few years, all the great legacy that Virginia has really undertaken there to make the organization healthy, I became very interested in taking on the role.
And what are you learning so far in your early tenure?
I think first I realized that not everybody knows all the great things that are happening. Right. They don't realize how diverse the High audiences are right now, and that we get 2,000 people to come to the High on a Friday night. They don't realize how many different venues the Alliance is going to this year. They don't realize that the Symphony has run 3 consecutive years in the black for their budgets. It's really quite strong. Mm-hmm. And then 2, I think the question is, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary next year, and the neighborhood has changed a lot. Midtown has become a thriving center of this whole city. And it's not only about bringing folks down from Gwinnett, but it's bringing folks across from 5th Street who now live there, who didn't live there before.
10 years from now, what do you want the Woodruff Arts Center to look like?
Well, I want it to look like a place that is very open at all times of day to the entire breadth of Atlanta. But I also want to see us not only doing things on campus. I want to see us doing things in places like the Beltline, in public parks. We already serve 134 counties across the state. I want to see us be a statewide resource and a regional resource for education.
When you go into work every day, you're surrounded by culture. Whether you're at the High and you get to see all the beautiful artwork that's hanging on the walls, if you hear music coming out of the Symphony Hall from a rehearsal, as someone who's a fan of culture yourself, what's that like?
Oh, it's incredible. It's energizing because every day there's something creative happening. But I think my daughter said it best. I brought her before school started this year to see all the different aspects. We went behind the stage at the Symphony, and we went to the costume shop at the Alliance. She turned to me and she said, "Do you do this every day?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "This isn't work, Dad." And I think that's true. I think in a lot of ways it's not work. It's a real pleasure and a joy, and it's a happy place to go. And I hope that's what everybody feels too when they come and visit.
Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed made a push to have a 1% sales tax like the one in Denver, Colorado, that would go to fund the arts and culture in Atlanta. The bill died on the floor of the last session of the General Assembly. Even still, Doug Shipman has pledged that the Woodruff Arts Center will support the many area arts organizations struggling to bring their work to life in the metro area. Well, straight ahead, as the debate over immigration rages on, employers are faced with an ever-shrinking pool of high-tech talent.